in the know, nonstop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com. Purple Daily, presented by Surly Brewing Company.
And so I think the logic in what Minnesota is doing here is sort of like where Kansas City was in 2013. Andy Reid got hired there. The draft had guys like Geno Smith and EJ Manuel in it. They decided, let's just get competent. Let's get good at the position. They traded for Alex Smith. Alex Smith gave them 5 years. That bought them time to build a team for a young quarterback and wait for the right young quarterback. And it wound up, ending up, that story wound up ending with the Chiefs trading up to go and get Patrick Mahomes. So I think that's Minnesota's strategy right now is Kirk Cousins is good for right now, and he'll buy us time to build this thing up. We can be good with him at quarterback, and eventually he'll get us to the next guy.
I gotta say, most of the time they tell you don't wear horizontal stripes. They make you look fat. Yeah. I think Albert Breer looks pretty good in horizontal stripes.
Yeah,
that's my main takeaway there.
He's very
pull off stripes.
He's thin. He works out a lot. I can tell you.
Albert Breer works out a lot.
Yeah, I saw him when I was at an event in 2010 or so.
Were you guys on
morning
dueling elliptical machines next to each other?
I once saw Shefty coming through the lobby to go back to his room, drenched in his own sweat.
Oh, that is.
These guys have to work out, man. They're TV stars. They are.
Get that in. I feel like Jay Glazer sleeps for 3.5 hours, works out for 18 hours, and then spends like 2.5 hours on Twitter.
He pumps iron though. Like I think Shefty and Breer run.
No, Glazer does mixed martial arts. And,
exactly. He's kicking people's asses.
Yeah. So, all right. Speaking of kicking people's asses, no, we don't really do any of that on here. Yeah. This is just daily Vikings entertainment here. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die. This is Purple Daily. If you missed it, Vikings vent line last night included plenty of venting from people that aren't happy about the Kirk Cousins extension. We also welcomed Kirk Cousins' #1 fan, Joe Spinoza from Minnesota Vikings Twitter fame, onto the show for like 15 or 20 minutes to present his case. So if you missed any of that, check it out last night on the Purple Daily podcast feed or YouTube channel. The show presented by our friends at Surly Brewing Company and also by TCL TVs, where they have a new lineup of award-winning TVs delivering the most entertainment with stunning resolution, all at an affordable cost. Enjoy more of the things you love with TCL. So, recapping day one, or I guess let's just say even the 48 hours leading into day one, the two big Vikings moves are re-signing Kirk Cousins, contract extension, and kind of kicking that can down the road and smoothing out the cap, and then bringing in another defensive tackle in Harrison Phillips, who is 26 years old, and he's been a rock-solid, above-average, but not spectacular interior defensive lineman, more of a run stuffer than anything. And with that, Michael Pierce is gone. They offered to restructure his contract. He said, no, I'd rather hit free agency. Meanwhile, about 6 or 7 of the top centers and guards have flown off the board, and the Vikings are still, at least publicly, withholding any information about how they're going to clear more cap space. So how do you feel about Harrison Phillips being the big move so far for the Vikings in free agency?
How can I put this? Being as positive as possible. Didn't see this coming from a positional standpoint. How's that? I'm not surprised that Michael Pierce is gone. I sort of expected that one, but I thought going to a 3-4 that they would probably pick between Pierce and Tomlinson. And I think contract-wise, it made more sense, Phil, to sever ties with Pierce, and that they would probably then use that money elsewhere. Guard, we talked about. Heck, cornerback. They are in desperate need there. And there were certainly some rumblings that they might go out and try and come to an agreement fairly quickly with the cornerback, which didn't happen at least yesterday. So I think the fairest way to say it is I was surprised by the positional choice that they started with. And if they don't come away from this process, and there's still some time, but if they don't come away from this process with at least one of two things, a guard or center, who is not just a guy who, hey, we'll just throw him in and give him a chance, who's actually a guy that we think solidifies the line, then I'm confused. I'm confused because If you're going to bring back Kirk, which, okay. If you're going to bring him back, though, I mean, we talked about this on Sunday after he signed or agreed to the extension, then isn't it incumbent on you to give him as much as possible from an offensive line standpoint? And look, you might not fill both guard and center, but one of those two to have an impact player to protect him. So day one of legal tampering, one word, surprised.
I'm gonna withhold all judgment for at least a couple days because there are still some offensive linemen out there that make sense for the Vikings. I mean, yes, to this point, Laken Tomlinson, who was connected to the Vikings, off the board. Brandon Scherf, we found out the money on him. It's just under $17 million per season with the Jaguars.
Yep.
Cap space talks. Now, the Jaguars are a dumpster fire, and they have a ton of cap space for a reason, but they've got Trevor Lawrence on a 5-year rookie scale contract, and so they can afford to overspend on a guard in free agency, just like we saw some teams do last year. But James Daniels is still on the board. Rock solid right guard for the Chicago Bears. In fact, he was rated 19th out of 82 guards on Pro Football Focus. I'm not going to go crazy saying names here because any of these names could fly off the board between now and when we post this episode. But sure. Andrew Norwell, I guess I think my biggest takeaway through the first day of the legal tampering period is it feels weird. And I'll even go back like a month and a half. They hire Kwesi. So they fire Rick Spielman, they fire Mike Zimmer because the culture is stale, if not toxic. The roster feels stale. The development has stalled. I mean, they had 10 draft picks that basically did nothing last year, right? Darisaw was the lone exception, the 11th. Maybe Wongwu. And so everything just felt like it was in need of a refresh. And so they bring in Kwesi, they bring in Kevin O'Connell, and yet to this point and even like as they were searching for Kevin O'Connell, Jim Harbaugh thought the job was his. Why did he think that? And then why was there an about face internally at the end?
Right.
Why were there all of these Kirk Cousins twists and turns, offers that were turned down by the Vikings only for them to do the same thing that they've been doing for 4 or 5 years, which is lock in a good, not great quarterback for a lot of money, right? Free agency. I mean, it almost feels like they hired Kwesi, and maybe you can shed some light on this. They hired Kwesi. He's got some new, potentially wild ideas for how to flip this franchise up and around and really clear this thing out for a run in 2023-24. And it feels to me like the Wilfs are the ones that are paralyzed by the idea of entering any sort of rebuild. Like they have been so shell-shocked in the past by what happened at the end of the Childress era, the Christian Ponder whiff, that, listen, you can come in here and you can change some things, and we definitely want your new collaborative culture and ideas, and this is all great, but let's be careful about trading Kirk Cousins. It feels to me like ownership has their hands on this just watching from afar. That's my theory.
I think it's correct, and this is a great path. Let's at least partially deep dive this path because I've got some theories based on what I used to know in covering this team for quite a few years for the Star Tribune, which is when the Wilfs bought the team and where we are now. And I don't know it's as simple as a 3-win season just scared them. I mean, I don't think that they enjoyed that. It stunk. But, Phil, I think this goes to, and we've definitely seen this, and we've never gotten an explanation of how it's shifted things. When I was on the beat, and part of the time that you were on the beat as well, the front man when it came to who owned the team without question was Ziggy Wilf. Like there was no question about it. He spoke at the time and we can say, oh, he didn't speak well, but who cares? He was the front man. Mm-hmm. That's no question shifted. Mark Wilf is now the guy. And that doesn't mean that his brother behind the scenes is not influencing things and talking here. But I think when you see that big a public shift, there's definitely changes made, which I have not been around. So things have changed since I left. I also think, and this goes back to a conversation that we had several times in the process as they went through trying to vet and hire eventually a GM and coach. Andrew Miller, the president of this team, who took over for Kevin Warren when Kevin went to become commissioner of the Big Ten, we have both heard now has his fingerprints all over things. And I think he came in and, probably being a smart guy, observed and spent a few years, trying to get the lay of the land, and didn't really impact things. At least he didn't from a football standpoint. That appears to have changed. So I guess to drill down a little bit on what you're saying, I don't even know that it's like 1 or 2 bad years, 12 years back. I think it might just be the natural progression of how the organization has evolved. But let me be clear in saying, I don't think that's great. I think that you hire your football people to do their football job.
I agree.
And it feels like the one thing that I used to, and I did this when we started the show, that I used to praise the Wolves for, which is they're really good, partially because they don't involve themselves. It feels like that has really changed.
So do you, just based on your 20 years covering the NFL and about half that as a beat writer, and you've covered the Wolves, and then based on just things that, we've heard throughout the last few weeks behind the scenes, is it a fair statement for me to say that the Wolves have not been hands off over the past month? The Wilfs have been, or some combination of Mark Wilf, Andrew Miller, people in ownership, business office have been hands on over the last few weeks.
I think that's a very fair statement. And my last thought about what might have gotten us here, I will throw out again. I sensed just from their comments some guilt about the fact that it felt like they probably weren't engaged enough for at least the last year, if not more, until they fired Rick and Mike on January 10th.
Yeah.
Because when they talked about, literally when you have a quote saying the GM and coach weren't talking, and very strongly insinuated ownership was not aware of how bad that had gotten, it does feel like the parent who pays no attention to his kid and then finds out the kid is in trouble and gets overly involved is now overly involved. Instead of saying, we're making changes, we trust Kwesi, we trust Kevin, it feels like they're like, hold on a second here. We're not going to allow this to happen again. And the involvement still is at a place where it probably shouldn't be, just because, look, they're not the football people.
Yeah. By the way, Kwesi, if you are watching or listening to this, blink twice if the Wilfs are shadow GMing over your head right now. We can save you. Blink twice.
I saw your tweet. I said blink 4 times if Zim is still like hiding in a closet.
So, this will still play out, but there's only so much they can do at this point. They're going to clear cap space. I wouldn't be surprised if another, Michael Pierce is gone. It wouldn't shock me if they swung another trade, or if there was a surprise cut, Eric Kendricks or somebody. And I do think they're going to add offensive line help. But in terms of like drastic changes to a team that hasn't been above 500 in 700 days, it's hard to see a path to drastic changes right now. Like what would the drastic change be? And again, maybe something happens in 10 minutes and renders what I just said irrelevant. But it feels like they are running it back with some different leadership and some tweaks. And they're hoping that the leadership and Kevin O'Connell can just do a better job molding, coaching. Okay, maybe Wyatt Davis doesn't just sit in the corner collecting dust for a full season, right? I think it feels like that's what the organization is banking on. I don't know. Is there a major change that could still happen here aside from tweaks that I'm missing?
I don't know about that. And it's almost not the point, though. I guess the point is it feels like there's been an organizational philosophical shift that I don't think is a good idea. It doesn't feel like the GM is necessarily being allowed. And we have both heard things about potential Kirk trades that, and not just, last week, last year too.
They've gotten multiple offers on Kirk Cousins.
Yes, and
which means that the GMs have engaged in meaningful talks,
yep,
like willing discussions about moving that contract.
And we talked a year ago about the fact that before they drafted Trey Lance, San Francisco called on Kirk, and it sounded like Rick said, "Oh, interesting," and the Wilfs were like, "Oh, no, you're not trading Kirk now." So I mean, this is 2 consecutive years, and so I guess it's not. If during the course of this podcast we find that they've signed a guard, that's great. But the point is, I thought one of the things that was a strength of the Wilfs was, we are going to support you. If something big comes up, we'll have opinions, but you're going to run our team. Feels like they've gotten away from that. And to me, that's always a very dangerous recipe. So it's not like, are they going to sign a guy? It's more of, what are you doing? And did you just hire a GM who you've empowered, or basically said, hey, everyone's going to collaborate, and that means us too, and we want to weigh in significantly on football topics? And that's where I start to say, ooh, that might not be a good idea.
Yeah, and I do understand. You know, at the end of the Rick Spielman run, he'd been with the organization for 16 years, and the Wilfs, don't they have their hands now in an MLS team? Is it Orlando?
Orlando.
They've got, they live in New Jersey. They've got business ventures, and so like, are they in the office every day in year 16 of their GM's tenure?
Right.
Trying to get a feel for the pulse. Year 8 of a head coach. Like, I kind of understand.
Yes.
Why they weren't fully like all over the pulse of what was happening. I'm sure they were disappointed by the results on the field. And so the reaction or overreaction to that maybe is to, okay, all right, we're going to hire some new guys, but those guys are also new. They've never been a GM or a coach before. And, like the oldest one is 40. So they're kind of, I'll say this. I think I don't love what's happening so far. I have said several times, I wouldn't have, even though the Cousins deal is more cap friendly than the $45 million hit they were staring at. Yeah, I think it caps your ceiling too much, and it just fits right in with what the Wilfs are obsessed with, which is, let's make sure that we're 7, 8, 9 wins competitive, and anything beyond that's gravy. And I look at this and say, it's been 60 years, guys. I don't care about 7 wins, 9 wins anymore. To me, it's 4 wins. It doesn't matter. Like 7 wins is 4 wins. 8 wins is 5 wins. I don't care. And they're so paralyzed by that. I think there's still some light at the end of the tunnel despite that. Because you can be competitive for the next couple seasons with Kirk Cousins, and you can do what you can in and around him, and you can still draft good young players for the future, and you can still draft a quarterback in 2023, a very quarterback-rich class if you want to.
Yep.
And by that point, Kirk will be on the verge of his 36th birthday, coming off of his latest, 2-year ironclad contract. And then it'll be a little bit more like the Chiefs maybe from 5 years ago, or the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen. Maybe the Wilfs maybe everyone's looking at this quarterback draft and saying there's some talent, but no one that's going to take over the reins now. So between now and the 2023 class, let's just make sure that we are competent. Now, again, I would have collected the draft capital. If a team like the Browns is offering 2 second-round picks, theoretically, right, I'm taking that. Right. And then I'm finding a new bridge quarterback. I can see the logic a little bit, but to your point, if Kwesi had different thoughts,
right,
and a different blueprint, and ownership is coming over the top and saying, we think we know better, that's a problem. And they need to take a step back because you hired this guy for a reason, if that's what's happening.
If that's what's happening, the thing here is, let's go back to calling him quarterback X. Because I feel like, you're talking about Kirk. Quarterback X. If I hire a GM and the GM says, you know what, I have an offer on the table that's it might force us to take a step back immediately. But if we trade quarterback X, we are going to be in a really sweet spot. And I say, well, hold on a second here. Let's talk about this. But you're a fan, Judd. Yeah, but I'm rich and I own this team and I'm your boss and that's a problem. So that's the problem here. It's not Cousins. It's not one particular player, Phil. It is the fact that I feel that the one thing these guys did a really good job at for a long time was providing support without providing a heavy hand. And tell me the last time that you think that basically huge fans of a sport who owned a team and got too involved, that the result of that was positive.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the
It just
Cowboys
doesn't
are a
usually-
class example over
Exactly.
25 years, right? Where the ownership says, "All right, I'm Jerry Jones."
Jerry Jones
I'm gonna-
derailed the entire thing because I mean, Jimmy Johnson built a juggernaut. He really did.
At least they were coming off 3 Super Bowl wins in a 4-year stretch.
Yep.
So I think where we differ here a little bit is I think you're looking at this as, okay, this is sort of a doom and gloom bad thing for the future of the franchise. And I think I'm still looking at it as, all right, they hired a 40-year-old general manager, first timer, who really has only been in the NFL for about 10 years or less. And then they hired a mid 30 something, 37, 38-year-old head coach that has barely been a coordinator before. We're going to put the training wheels on these guys a little bit. Let's not uproot everything and flip it on its head. Let's just, all right, Kevin, you're going to work with Kirk. Okay, we're going to lower the cap hit and we're going to then take the training wheels off after 2022. I don't love it if that's what's happening, but I still think it doesn't prevent you, like I said, from drafting a quarterback in 2023.
Yep.
Probably, the NFC has a lot of weak spots. You're probably still going to win 8 or 9 games. Maybe you can get lucky and win a couple more. I don't think you're going to win the division if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy. So I'm more mildly annoyed by the way this is playing out. I feel like you're over there a little bit more, like you're trying to be sports dad telling us, no, this is...
I'm telling you, I see, if this was the stock market, I see a disturbing trend on the market. And I'm just telling you that you might want to make a move now because it is a concerning sign if the smoke, it's a smoldering. So I'm not panicked. That's not true. But this is a smoldering pile of towels. It's not in flames yet, but there's some smoke starting to rise. And you're like, oh, that's not good. I wonder if I should call the fire department before the whole building catches on fire. That's what I am saying is because it's very important to keep in mind that I have very much for a long time defended how the Wilfs do things. I praised it. Yeah. I've said before, and I just think that that's a good template. Does Jim Pohlad do a great job? Absolutely not. But I don't think
he's a dud.
Exactly. But the one thing is, I don't think that Jim walks in and says, "Okay, here's the thing: you are not going to trade this guy."
Well, he definitely says you're not going to trade for this guy.
Oh,
and you're not going to sign this.
He says
guy.
We're not going to sign. Which is where the Wilfs, and yes, it's a salary cap league, but I mean that's where the Wilfs have done a great job at times previously, right? Because they have done a really good job at saying, "Yeah, sign this guy, sign that guy," and they've made some, good moves. I didn't expect the first signing to be a defensive tackle, but
yeah,
again, we'll wait and see. You're right.
So there's another story that came out this morning, Aaron Rodgers related here that we have to get to. But let's talk about our favorite beverage during free agency period. A little Surly Brewing Company.
You know what? I was watching last night, waiting to do our Purple After Dark vent line. And I said to myself, Judd, it's time to head down the street to the liquor store and get a 6-pack of Surly. And of course, I said, what do I want to get? Because there's a lot of good choices. Surly Furious was my choice. And I'm going to tell you right now, it went down very smooth. On a Monday night, as the signings, or I should say the legal tampering moves came in, I was enjoying a Surly Furious, proving again that there is no sporting event with which you cannot enjoy a Furious. Always a good choice.
Show us your cans on Twitter, by the way. And you know what? Show us your drawers. Chill Boys.
What? Oh!
Show us your drawers. I mean, just, don't get creepy or anything, but...
you just invited it, Phil.
Chill Boys is a Minnesota-based company. You can find them online at chillboys.com, and they are the official underwear partner of our bodies. That's right. I'm Purple Daily.
That was one of the... You just found 3 ways to make that totally uncomfortable.
I'm going to move past it right now and just say go to chillboys.com and find out what bamboo fabric and the long underwear can do for your life. Chillboys.com. So Aaron Rodgers just agreed to a $150 million contract over 3 years that lowers his cap hit in 2022, believe it or not, do the math on this, to $28 million. So they've lowered his cap hit $18 million for this year.
Okay.
Of course, that means they're kicking about $75 million in dead money into years like 2024, 25. So they're basically saying Aaron Rodgers for a couple more ironclad seasons, lower the cap hit this year because we can win a Super Bowl this year, we think, and then we'll deal with the dead cap money when he's gone when we're rebuilding. So that's what this contract is.
Yes.
It's one of the biggest, I think it's the biggest guaranteed chunk of money in NFL history here. And I think it brings up, and we went through this exercise a little bit last night when debating our guy, number one Kirk Cousins fan, Joe, on Ventline. But I think one thing that people don't really wrap their heads around enough, like you just look at the Kirk Cousins contract in a vacuum and say, well, look at that. Hey, so he went from a $45 million cap hit, which was top 3 in the NFL, to $31 million. So the guy just saved $15 million in cap space. But if you start to look at the cost value of every quarterback in the NFL right now, and you start to rank them based on, and like I think the parameters I put out last night were, all right, you have to build a Super Bowl winning team in the next 2 to 3 years. Maybe you can win it this year, but if not this year, then you have to build a Super Bowl winning team in the next 2 or 3 years with your current quarterback on their current cap hit. Where would you start drafting those quarterbacks if you ranked all the quarterbacks and their current cap hits? And I contend that even at $31 million, which is now the 5th highest cap hit instead of the 2nd or 3rd, I don't think Kirk is anywhere near the top 10 or 12. Joe Burrow, a $9 million cap hit. Yes, please. Stop me if I get to one that you would rather have Kirk at 31, okay? Joe Burrow at 9. Justin Herbert at 6. And you're seeing what the Chargers are doing with all of that space. They're trading for Khalil Mack. They're signing... Didn't they just sign a cornerback, right? Kyler Murray at $9 million.
Okay.
Lamar Jackson at $3 million.
Oh my God. Okay.
Josh Allen at $16 million.
Okay.
Matthew Stafford at 23. Russell Wilson with the Broncos is a $24 million cap hit.
Yeah.
Tom Brady, $25 million cap hit. Rodgers at $28 million now.
Okay.
I'd probably take that. Derek Carr at 25. I'm a yes. So I get Derek Carr and $6 million extra dollars to spend on a guard or something?
Yeah. Okay.
Patrick Mahomes at 35. I know it's more than 31, but he's Patrick Mahomes.
Okay.
So I'm taking it. Dak at 20. So I think they're pretty close. I think Dak is a slight edge, and I get $11 million extra.
You say the $11 million extra.
Yeah. Mac Jones at $3 million, so I save 30. I think a lot of front offices would even say Tua at 8. Now, he's not as good of a quarterback as Kirk. That's not the exercise. It's building a team under a salary cap of $208 million. Would you rather have Kirk at 31 or Tua at 8? I think a lot of front offices would say Tua at 8.
And with Teddy's competing with them, too.
Hey, Teddy.
So give me both those guys.
So 1, 2, 3. Trevor Lawrence at 9.
Oh, God, yeah. Are you kidding?
On a 3-year window?
I think he's going to be great. So
yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 for sure. And then we're kind of like, Tua and Trevor Lawrence. So there's somewhere between, again, 13 and 15 quarterbacks that you'd probably rather have at their current cap.
That list just ruined my day. I'm going back to bed.
And this is it. It's like, this is why the contract matters, and this is why you can't just dismiss it and say, well, I mean, like, it's, they're paying market value. I don't care about market value. I care about winning a Super Bowl, and I'm looking at these other teams that have a much, much better chance at building a Super Bowl roster because their quarterback, who might even be better, is far cheaper. It just gives you more leeway to build a line, to build a defense, to re-sign players, etc.
And that entire list that you just read provided example after example of why you have to hit in the draft. I mean, the window, right? The window. I got a note today that said, yeah, but when Herbert's contract's up, what then? I said, well, you signed him to an extension, but you pounce right now.
Yes.
Like the Chargers are pouncing.
Yes.
Good for them. They should. That's why. Like, this isn't an affront of Kirk. Those... When you're reading cap hits like 3 million, 9 million, ridiculously low on productive quarterbacks, my God.
Yeah, it's tough. And I know the Vikings have whiffed, even with the cap space that they've been able to finagle. They whiffed on a bunch of defenders last year. So some of this is you're setting yourself up to make it way harder because you have a good, not great quarterback still making 15% of your salary cap.
Yeah.
And some of it previously is, okay, you still have money to spend. Are you spending it and allocating it correctly and effectively? And then are you capitalizing on your first round picks, your third round picks? And I think across the board, especially at the end, the last couple of years there with Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer, the answer was no, no, no in a lot of cases. Justin Jefferson was a hit, but a lot of no's in those categories. So, oh man, it's but I mean, what's done is done, and now they have to find a way to clear some space for, like, they need a league average right guard at bare minimum. Like, bring someone in who is a league average right guard. There will be offensive linemen in the draft. We don't know about the development of a Wyatt Davis, but they right now, for sure, by my count, have 2 openings along the offensive line. They've got 2 openings at starting cornerback positions, at least a linebacker opening, and maybe an edge rusher opening.
Yeah. On the offensive line at center, I will say this because we don't know him well yet. Kevin O'Connell, to go back, and I think we talked about this at the time at the Combine, spoke very highly of Bradbury. I thought there's no way, but there's a fighting chance they disagree with us. That they think that Garrett Bradbury is a fit there. If that's the case, I'm sort of at a loss.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you come in and everyone's bad-mouthing the old coach and coaching staff, and you just say, well, I mean, these guys are incompetent. We can come in and it's a former first-round pick. Yeah, he's a talented guy. He just wasn't being used the right way. And maybe they're right. Maybe they're right. But it's a gamble.
He was being tossed into the third row of the stands at Lambeau. I don't think Zim could fix that one.
Yeah. So we'll see. I'm in wait-and-see mode still. By the way, we're not in wait-and-see mode when it comes to Judd's weight loss. That is full go C mode. We can see the almost.
I am locked in. I am locked in there. I made my decision, my signing on the market months ago, and guess what? Because of my friends at Livia Weight Control Centers, I'm down 30 plus pounds. That's exactly right, 30 plus pounds. And now I want you to join me on the I Did It 8-week challenge, in which you get your first 8 weeks for free. In my first 8 weeks, I lost 26 pounds. Imagine taking off 26 pounds. Talk about feeling good. Here's how you do it. 855-GO-LIVEA, 855-GO-LIVEA, Livia.com. Inside the state or outside, they can find a way to help you. Livia.com. Check them out. Take the weight off. Tell them Score North sent you. It'll be the best free agent pickup that you get, because your pickup will result in shedding those excess pounds.
You can get below the weight cap, the weight salary.
I like that. Yeah,
you're
that's a good one. You're exactly right.
Also, if you are a business owner out there, a couple things. We do have a couple openings from now through the end of the year. If you want your business to partner with our business here and spread the word about your business, send me an email, pmackey@scorenorth.com, if you want to partner up with us and spread the word. Also, if you're a business owner, Federated Mutual Insurance Company is all about minimizing risk and maximizing upside for your business. You can find a full list of industries Federated protects at federatedinsurance.com, and you can find all sorts of tools and resources and people that can help you navigate your journey as a business owner. Federatedinsurance.com, where it's our business to protect yours. All right, we're going to shut up and let Declan post this and hope that it doesn't become outdated, and hope that the Vikings can maybe find an offensive lineman that doesn't get forklifted back into Kirk Cousins. That's the goal right now.